The alien marketplace was loud and full of strange smells. Voices called out from every side, selling food, tools, and glowing crystals. Tall creatures with scaled skin brushed past, their tails swaying as they moved. The air was thick with a scent of spices, hot oil, and something burning in the distance. Evan, a human soldier in plain clothes, walked slowly through the crowd. He kept his head down, but his eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, strapped between his legs. Hanging from a thick harness was a small metal case. It was dark silver, smooth, and humming softly, almost like it was alive. He had been in alien cities before, but never one this tense. People kept looking at him longer than usual, whispering behind their hands. A group of insect-like merchants stopped talking as he passed, their black eyes following the case. Evan ignored them and kept walking. He knew that curiosity could turn into danger very quickly out here. His orders were clear. Deliver the case to the human embassy, no stops, no questions. But then it happened. A strong female voice cut through the noise of the market. "Human, what is that thing between your legs? Is it dangerous?" Every head turned, the crowd went silent in an instant. The smell of spices seemed to fade, replaced by the dry scent of dust and heat. Standing in front of him was a tall alien woman. Her skin was pale silver, her hair a deep blue tied in a warrior's braid. She wore black armor with sharp edges, and on her back was a long spear made of some shining metal. Her eyes were bright and fierce, like she had faced death many times and didn't fear it. She was staring not at his face, but at the case strapped to him. Her hand rested near her spear as if ready to use it. Evan stopped, his boots pressing into the dusty stone street. The silence around them grew heavier. Some aliens moved back, pulling their children away. Others leaned closer, eager to see what would happen. A pair of city guards began to walk toward them, their weapons in hand. Evan gave her a calm look, though inside his pulse was speeding up. "That's none of your concern," he said quietly. The alien woman tilted her head. Her voice was steady, almost cold. "It is my concern if it's dangerous to my people." Evan didn't answer, instead adjusting the strap of the case. He could feel the faint vibration against his legs. The core inside was active. If anyone knew what it really was, the entire market could turn into a battlefield. The guards came closer, their boots echoing on the stone. One of them pointed at the case and barked in a language Evan didn't understand. The warrior woman didn't move aside. Her silver skin seemed to glow faintly in the sunlight. Her eyes locked on him like a predator. Evan felt the tension around him, the kind of tension that could explode with one wrong word. Then, above the market, a deep mechanical hum filled the air. Shadows passed over the stalls as something large flew overhead. Evan glanced up and saw dark shapes in the sky. Drones. Not merchant drones, not delivery drones, but hunter drones. The kind that could track a target in seconds and destroy it in minutes. People in the market began to panic. Merchants pulled down their stalls. Parents grabbed their children. The sound of metal wings beating against the hot air grew louder. Someone shouted. "They're scanning the crowd." The guards froze for a second, looking up. The warrior woman's eyes narrowed and still. She didn't move from blocking Evan's path. Evan's instincts screamed at him to run, but he knew if he did, every eye would be on him. He tried. 2 steps sideways, but she mirrored his movement, blocking him again. "What is it?" she demanded, her voice lower now but more intense. "If you want to live, get out of my way," Evan replied sharply. Her hand tightened on her spear. From above, a drone's red targeting light flickered across the crowd and landed right on Evan's chest. The market erupted into chaos. People shoved each other. Stalls crashed to the ground. Fabric canopies tore in the wind of the drones. Evan took one last look at the warrior woman. "Fine," he muttered under his breath. Without warning, he pushed forward. Breaking into a run, the crowd split around him, but the warrior didn't let him go. She chased him, her long legs and light armor giving her speed. The sound of boots, claws, and hooves pounded against the stone streets as others joined the chase. The case swung heavily between his legs with each step. He knew if it fell into the wrong hands, the entire sector would be at risk. The hum of the drones grew sharper. They were locking onto his position. Evan spotted a narrow alley ahead. Half hidden between two tall buildings, he darted inside, breathing hard. But just as he reached the end, a shadow slid into the alley behind him. It was her, the silver-skinned warrior. She stood at the mouth of the alley, spear in hand, blocking the way back. The drones buzzed somewhere above, searching, her eyes locked on the case again. And she spoke slowly. "You're not leaving until I know the truth, human." Evan looked past her. The main street was full of chaos, guards shouting, people running behind him. The alley ended in a solid metal wall. The only way out was through her, and above, the drones were circling closer. He had only seconds to decide, fight her, trust her, or be caught. The hum of the drones above was growing louder, their shadow passing across the narrow alley like a hunter's wing. Evan's mind raced, his hands tightening on the strap of the case. The silver-skinned warrior blocked the only way back to the street. Her spear angled slightly forward, not in full attack stance, but ready. Her eyes never left the strange object between his legs. "You will answer," she said. Her voice sharp but not shouting, "or you will not leave." A flash of red light washed over the alley walls as a drone passed overhead. Scanning the tight space, Evan's instinct screamed. He didn't have time to argue. In one sudden motion, he moved forward, not to attack her, but to slide past. She stepped sideways to block, but he twisted his shoulder, brushing past the spear. The metal edge grazing his sleeve, she made a low growl in her throat and spun to follow. By the time she turned fully, he was already back on the main street. Pushing through the rushing crowd, the marketplace was in chaos. Merchants were shoving crates into stalls, trying to save what they could. Children with scaled skin were being pulled by their parents toward underground shelters. Overhead, 3 drones hovered in a loose triangle. Scanning with bright red sensors, Evan kept his head low and moved fast, weaving between bodies. The case thumped against his thigh with each step. The hum from inside it felt stronger now, like it knew the danger was close. But the warrior woman was fast. She moved through the crowd like a shadow cutting through light. Her armor catching glints of the alien sun. Her braid swung behind her as she leaped over a fallen food cart. Every time Evan glanced over his shoulder, she was closer. Her eyes never lost their focus, not on him, but on the case. The smell of the market shifted suddenly. The air grew sharper. Metallic, the scent of ion engines powering up. Evan looked ahead and saw a patrol transport blocking the far end of the street. The guards inside were already pointing in his direction. He swore under his breath and veered left, shoving through a group of tall, fur-covered aliens. One of them shouted angrily, but he didn't slow down. The new street was narrower, lined with low stalls selling strange glowing fruits and jars of moving insects. He grabbed a jar and smashed it to the ground behind him. A cloud of tiny flying creatures burst out, swarming toward the warrior woman, but instead of slowing, she simply waved her spear. The energy blade flashing and the insects scattered. Her boots barely touched the ground as she kept after him. A sudden alarm blared from somewhere above. The drones had locked onto his location. Red beams of light cut through the street, sweeping over panicked faces until they found him. The nearest drone dropped lower, extending small blaster arms. Evan ducked behind a vendor's cart, the shots hitting the ground and exploding in bursts of white sparks. The warrior woman didn't flinch. She used the confusion to close the distance even more. Evan's eyes darted around, searching for any way out. Ahead, Between two leaning buildings, he saw a thin gap, barely wide enough for a man. Without thinking, he lunged toward it. His shoulders scraped against the rough walls. As he forced himself through, the gap opened into a dim, abandoned walkway lined with rusted pipes. He ran without looking back, but then he heard the soft, fast footsteps behind him. She had followed him through the gap without hesitation. The walkway turned sharply and led into an open square, but it wasn't empty. 4 city guards stood. There, their strange curved rifles raised. They shouted at him in their language, but their meaning was clear. Stop. The warrior appeared behind him, breathing steadily for a moment. Evan considered surrender, but then the case vibrated. Sharply, almost painfully. It was a reminder that failure wasn't an option. He moved before the guards could fire. Dropping to one knee, he slid the case forward. Using it to trip the nearest guard, the warrior leaped over him, striking another guard's weapon with her spear and sending it clattering away. The guards hesitated clearly, not expecting her to help him. Evan grabbed the case and used the moment to sprint toward the far side of the square. She was right behind him, not attacking, not stopping, just following. They dashed into another street. This one quieter, but narrower. Only a few civilians were here, their faces confused as they watched the chase. The sunlight was weaker here, shadows stretching from tall, leaning towers. The hum of the drones was still above, but more distant now. Maybe they had lost sight of him for a moment. Finally, Evan spotted a half-broken stairway leading downward, into the ground, without a word. He jumped over the railing and dropped onto the cracked stone steps. The warrior followed instantly. Landing with a light thud, they descended into darkness, the noise of the market fading behind them. The air was cooler here, smelling faintly of old oil and metal. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy door stood half open. Evan slipped inside and found himself in a long, metallic tunnel lit by flickering strips of pale light. He slowed for the first time, turning to face her. She didn't raise her spear. This time, instead, she studied him closely, her breathing steady. "You run like prey," she said softly. "But you hold yourself like a predator. What are you? Human?" Evan didn't answer right away. From somewhere deep in the tunnel came a sound, a metallic scrape followed by a low mechanical growl. The warrior's eyes shifted toward the darkness ahead. Whatever was in the tunnel wasn't friendly. For the first time since the chase began, they both stood still. The question between them remained unanswered, and the danger ahead was now greater than the danger behind. The tunnel was cold, the air heavy with the scent of rust and damp metal. Flickering white lights buzzed weakly overhead, casting long, thin shadows along the curved walls. Every step Evan took echoed softly, the sound swallowed by the emptiness ahead. The warrior followed close, her footsteps lighter, almost silent. Her silver skin caught the faint light, her blue braids swaying gently as she moved. Neither spoke. For several seconds, both listening to the faint sound in the distance, a metallic scrape, followed by a low, rumbling growl. Evan's grip on the strap of the case tightened. The vibration from inside was stronger now, steady but pulsing, like a heartbeat. The warrior's spear was already in her hands, the tip glowing faintly with blue light. "You know what's ahead," she said quietly, her voice calm but sharp. "I know it's hunting us," Evan replied. His eyes scanning the tunnel, she tilted her head slightly, studying him as if measuring how much of a fighter he really was. Her voice dropped even lower. "If it's after you, then it's after that thing between your legs." He smirked faintly despite the tension. "You're not letting go of that question, you?" Before she could answer, the scraping noise grew louder. The sound came in bursts, like something walking with heavy, uneven steps. Evan motioned for her to move slowly, and they began walking deeper into the tunnel. The light flickered more, and a faint mist curled along the floor from somewhere ahead. The tunnel widened slightly, opening into a larger chamber with rusted pipes along the ceiling. Evan stopped just inside the entrance, listening. The growl came again, but now it was joined by the sound of metal grinding against stone. From the far side of the chamber, a shape began to move out of the shadows. It was a machine, tall, insect-like, with 4 sharp legs that stabbed into the floor as it walked. Its body was covered in black plating, glowing red sensors scanning back and forth. At its center, a narrow opening revealed spinning blades and cables moving like muscles. The warrior's grip on her spear tightened, her eyes narrowing. "It's a seeker," she whispered. "They only hunt high-value targets." Evan's stomach sank. That meant the machine knew exactly what he carried. The seeker's head turned toward them, its sensors locking instantly. Onto the case, it let out a mechanical shriek, the sound so loud it made the tunnel vibrate. Without warning, it lunged forward, its metal legs tearing grooves into the floor. Evan jumped back as the warrior stepped in front, her spear slashing in a wide arc. The blade struck the seeker's side, sending sparks flying, but the machine barely slowed. It swung one of its sharp legs at her, and she rolled aside. Evan ducked low, moving to the side of the chamber, searching for any opening. The seeker twisted with impossible speed. Now aiming directly for him, it knew the case was the priority. Evan grabbed a small round device from his belt and slammed it onto the floor. A sharp pulse of high-pitched sound filled the chamber, making the seeker stumble for a second. The warrior used the moment to thrust her spear deep into one of its joints. The machine shrieked again, but instead of retreating, it pushed forward, forcing her back. Evan darted behind the seeker, pulling another small gadget from the case. It was a rectangular emitter with glowing edges. He twisted a dial and threw it toward the seeker's legs. The emitter stuck to the floor and released a burst of magnetic force. The machine's movements became jerky, its legs catching against the pole. The warrior seized the chance, spinning her spear in a fast blur and slicing one leg clean off. The seeker staggered but still didn't stop. It turned toward Evan again, dragging itself forward with the remaining legs. Evan felt the heat from its sensors on his skin. The warrior shouted something in her own language, a warning, just as the seeker leaped. Evan rolled to the side, the machine's sharp legs stabbing into the spot where he'd been. The impact shook the floor, sending a small shower of dust from the ceiling. Evan scrambled to his feet, the case bouncing against his thigh. He could hear the hum from inside, faster now, more intense. The warrior leaped onto the seeker's back, driving her spear down between its armor plates. The machine twisted violently. Slamming against the wall to shake her off, she held on for several seconds before being thrown to the floor, landing hard. Evan saw his chance. He pulled a final device from the case, a sphere covered in glowing lines. He pressed a button and threw it into the seeker's open center. The sphere detonated with a burst of blinding white light. The seeker froze, its sensors flickering. Then its body collapsed, the sound of grinding metal echoing in the chamber. Silence filled the space, broken only by the warrior's breathing. She pushed herself to her feet, brushing dust from her armor. Her eyes flicked from the fallen seeker to the device still in Evan's hand. "That is no common weapon," she said slowly. "Humans do not walk with toys like that unless they are hiding something greater." Evan gave a half smile. "Told you, it's complicated." The warrior stepped closer, her gaze fixed once more on the case. "This thing between your legs," she said, her voice softer but more curious now. "If the seekers want it, that means others will come too." Evan nodded, adjusting the strap. "Which is why I can't stay here, and neither should you." From somewhere far down the tunnel, a faint new sound began. More footsteps, heavier this time. The warrior's expression hardened. "They are not alone," she said, gripping her spear again. Evan glanced at the shadows ahead, and then at her. "Then we move together," he said. And without another word, they ran deeper into the unknown darkness. The tunnel air was thick with dust and the faint electric smell left by the destroyed seeker. But the new sound, those heavy footsteps, was growing louder. They weren't rushed, but steady, confident. Like predators closing in on prey they knew couldn't escape. Evan adjusted the strap of the case, his muscles tense. The warrior was already ahead by a few steps. Her spear angled forward, the blue glow along its edge pulsing slowly. Her braid swung with each movement, her eyes locked on the darkness ahead. The first shadow appeared. A tall figure stepped into the flickering light, followed by two more. They were armored, but not like the seeker. These were living soldiers. Their armor was dark bronze, their faces hidden behind insect-like masks. Each held a long weapon shaped like a rifle. But with jagged energy coils along the barrel, the warrior stiffened, her voice low.
"Mercenaries?"
"Paid hunters." Evan didn't ask who paid them. He already knew the answer. The case? One of the mercenaries pointed straight at him and spoke in a harsh, alien language. The meaning was clear. "Hand it over." Evan shook his head slowly. The mercenary didn't repeat the demand. Instead, he raised his weapon, the coil sparking. The shot fired with a crack of blue light, but before it hit, the warrior spun her spear in a tight arc. The blade's energy field deflecting the bolt, it smashed into the wall beside them, leaving a blackened scorch mark. Evan didn't hesitate. He pulled a small rectangular shield emitter from his belt and slammed it into the ground. A translucent barrier flared to life between them and the mercenaries. The barrier wasn't strong enough to last long, but it bought them seconds. The warrior didn't wait for orders. She leaped over the edge of the barrier, landing in front of the nearest mercenary. Her spear sliced through his rifle before he could react. Evan stayed behind the barrier, quickly pulling a compact blaster from the case. He fired at the second mercenary, forcing him back. The air filled with flashes of blue and red light as energy bolts cracked against metal. The third mercenary tried to flank from the side. Evan noticed too late, but the warrior didn't. She spun and hurled her spear like a dart, the glowing blade striking the attacker's shoulder and knocking him into the wall. Without a weapon in her hands, she didn't slow. She charged forward, grabbing the spear back and using its momentum to sweep the legs of the first mercenary. The man fell hard, the sound of armor hitting the floor echoing in the tunnel. Evan dropped the barrier and moved forward. The second mercenary tried to retreat down the tunnel, shouting something into a comm device. Evan knew what that meant. Reinforcements. He sprinted after him, closing the gap before the soldier could turn fully, grabbing the back of his armor. Evan slammed him against the wall. The impact jarred the soldier's weapon loose. Evan caught it before it hit the floor and used it to fire a precise shot at the comm device. Shattering it, the warrior was still moving with speed and precision. She disarmed the first mercenary completely, kicking his weapon away into the shadows. Her movements were almost too fast to follow. Each strike calculated, each dodge flowing into the next. Evan noticed how she fought differently than humans. Less about brute force, more about redirection, using her enemy's own motion against them. But her eyes never left him for long. Even in the middle of the fight, she kept checking the case. Not with greed, but with the sharp awareness of someone who understood its value. The last standing mercenary made one final desperate move. He fired a charged blast at Evan, the energy so strong it glowed white. Evan dropped to the ground just in time. The shot tearing a hole through a pipe above, steam hissed down into the tunnel. Filling the air with hot mist, the warrior used the cover, vanishing into the steam and reappearing behind the attacker. Her spear pierced his armor in a single clean strike, the blue energy flashing bright before fading. The mercenary dropped without a sound. Silence returned, broken only by the hiss of escaping steam. Evan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. The warrior stood over the fallen mercenaries for a moment before turning to him. "You fight like someone who's been hunted before," she said, her voice calm. "More than once," Evan replied, adjusting the case strap. She stepped closer, her eyes still sharp. "What is it you're carrying that's worth so much blood?" she asked. Evan shook his head. "Something humans don't want anyone else to have." Before she could press further, a faint rumble shook the floor under their feet. Evan looked toward the far end of the tunnel. The shadows there seemed to shift and twist. The warrior's expression tightened. "That's not more mercenaries," she said. "That's heavier." From the darkness ahead came a deep, mechanical growl, lower and slower than the seeker, but somehow more dangerous. The flickering lights overhead dimmed even further. Evan glanced at her. "If we want to make it out, we do it together." She gave the smallest nod, gripping her spear tighter, and side by side they moved toward the sound, ready for whatever was coming next. The rumble from deeper in the tunnel faded for a moment, replaced by a heavy silence. The warrior's sharp eyes studied the shadows ahead, her grip on the spear unshaken. Evan adjusted the strap of the metal case, feeling its weight like a constant reminder pressing against him. He could still sense the faint vibration inside, steady, rhythmic, like a pulse. The air was colder here. The smell of rust and damp stone thick. A faint drip of water echoed down the corridor, each drop falling with a slow, steady beat. They moved carefully, their boots splashing through shallow puddles. The tunnel widened into a low chamber with broken control panels along the walls. Wires hung like vines, some sparking faintly. It looked abandoned for decades, but the stale air carried a sense of being watched. The warrior stopped in the middle of the room, turning toward him. "We cannot keep running without knowing what we are protecting," she said firmly. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of command. "Tell me, human, what is in that case?" Evan shook his head slowly. "Knowing will make you a target for the rest of your life," he said, his tone low. She didn't flinch. "I have been a target since I was born," she replied, her silver skin catching the dim light, "and I have not died yet." Her eyes flicked down to the case, then back up to his face. "Open it." The hum from inside seemed louder now, as if the object could hear her demand. Evan stood still for a moment, weighing the choice. He had orders to keep it sealed until delivery. But the truth was simple. She had saved his life more than once today. If she was going to keep following him into danger, she deserved to know why. Without a word, he knelt and unfastened the thick latches on the side. Each lock clicked open with a heavy metallic sound. The warrior leaned slightly closer, her eyes narrowing when the final latch came free. Evan slowly lifted the lid. Inside, resting in a bed of black foam, was a cube the size of his hand. It wasn't metal or stone. Its surface shimmered like shifting liquid glass. Colors flowed across it in patterns that made no sense, yet felt strangely alive. The hum was coming from the cube itself, soft but powerful. The warrior's expression changed. She didn't look scared, but there was a deep respect in her gaze. "This is not a weapon," she said quietly. Evan's eyes stayed on the cube, not in the usual sense. He lifted it carefully, and the light from it spilled across the room. Even the shadows on the walls seemed to shift in its glow. "This is a human pulse core," he explained, his voice steady. "A power source," she guessed, her tone holding both curiosity and caution. "More than that," Evan said. "It can power an entire fleet or a single ship so strong it could rule the galaxy." Her gaze locked on his. "And you carry this between your legs through a public market," she said, almost as if testing him. Evan gave a faint smile. "Hiding in plain sight works better than you think." The warrior's fingers flexed against her spear, but not in threat, more in thought. If it is this powerful, then every faction in the galaxy will come for it, she said. They already have, Evan replied, his tone darkening. She looked back at the cube, the shifting colors reflecting in her eyes. And your people. Why would they risk sending you alone with it? Because if they sent a warship, everyone would know, he answered, and the hunt would start before we left orbit. A distant echo of heavy footsteps interrupted them. This time, it wasn't one set, it was many. The sound of armor clinking, weapons being loaded. Voices muttering in a language neither of them spoke. The warrior's stance shifted instantly into readiness. Evan quickly slid the cube back into the case and locked the latches. He felt the vibration against his legs again, like the cube was alive and restless. They're close, she said, her voice sharper now. Evan scanned the chamber for exits. There were two, the way they came, and another narrow maintenance shaft on the far wall. But before they could move, a voice echoed from the tunnel. They'd entered. It was deep, commanding, and familiar to her. Rin, the voice called. You will bring the human to me and live. The warrior froze for a fraction of a second. Evan noticed the change in her expression, a flash of recognition and something colder. Who is that? He asked quietly. My old commander. She said, her voice low and tense. He could see the muscles in her jaw tighten as the footsteps grew louder. From the tunnel's mouth, a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing heavy black armor with red markings, the man's eyes visible through his helmet's visor. Fixed first on the warrior, then on the case. You know what I want. The commander said, his tone carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. Evan shifted his stance slightly, ready to run if needed. The commander looked at Rin. Give him to me, and you walk away free. The warrior didn't answer. The silence between them stretched. Heavy, the commander's eyes narrowed. You owe me your life, Rin. Now pay your debt. Evan kept his gaze locked on her, searching for any sign of which way she would turn. He could see the conflict in her duty to her past, or to the truth she had just learned. Finally, she took one slow step forward, her spear lowering. Evan's grip on the case tightened. If she chose her commander, it would end here. But at the last moment, she turned her head and met his eyes. Run, she said, her voice sharp. Then she spun toward the commander, her spear flashing as the chamber erupted into chaos. The commander's armor gleamed faintly in the flickering light. His stance wide, steady, Rin's spear sliced through the air toward him, the blue glow leaving a streak in the dimness. The commander caught the shaft mid-swing with one armored hand, his strength stopping her attack cold. You still fight like a soldier under my command, he said, his voice low but cutting. Rin pushed forward, twisting the spear in an attempt to break his grip. You're not my commander anymore, she said sharply, her silver skin flushed with effort. Evan didn't wait to see the outcome. He turned and sprinted toward the maintenance shaft at the far wall. The case bounced against his thigh with every step, its steady hum now vibrating through the strap into his shoulder. From behind, the sound of weapons charging filled the chamber. More soldiers were entering, their boots striking the floor in perfect rhythm. Evan dove into the narrow shaft, the cold metal walls scraping his arms as he slid down. The echo of Rin's voice reached him. Go, human. Don't stop. But he didn't go far. The shaft dropped into another section of the tunnels, dimly lit and quiet for the moment. Evan crouched low, listening above. The clash of metal on metal rang out as Rin and her commander fought. Her attacks were fast, sharp, precise. His were heavier, calculated. Each strike meant to break her stance. Their voices cut through the noise, hers angry. His calm, you were my finest recruit, he said. And now you throw your life away for a human. I'm not throwing it away, she replied. I'm keeping it. Evan's hands tightened on the case. He could run now, slip away before. The soldiers found him, but the image of Rin standing alone against them wouldn't leave his mind. He wasn't here to make friends, but she'd fought for him. And that meant something. He exhaled slowly, reached into the case, and pulled out a small cylindrical device, a shock charge. If he timed it right, he could give her an opening. Climbing back up the shaft was harder than sliding down. The metal was slick with condensation, and his boots slipped more than once. But when he reached the top, the fight was still raging. Rin had managed to push the commander back a few steps. But now, she was surrounded by 4 of his soldiers. They circled her, weapons raised, waiting for an opening. The commander stood just behind them, his eyes locked on Evan as if he had known he'd return. "You could have been free, human," the commander said, his tone calm but heavy with threat. "Free from what?" Evan shot back, breathing. Without another word, he rolled the shock charge across the floor toward the group. It emitted a quick, sharp series of beeps. The soldiers barely had time to react before a burst of white-blue energy exploded outward. The shock wasn't lethal, but it was enough to drop them to their knees, weapons clattering to the ground. Rin didn't hesitate. She spun, her spear a blur as she disarmed 2 soldiers in one motion. Evan rushed forward, grabbing one of the fallen rifles and firing. At the floor near the others' feet, forcing them to scatter, the commander moved through the chaos like a predator. One heavy punch knocked the rifle from Evan's hands, the shock sending pain up his arm. Evan stumbled back, his shoulder hitting the cold tunnel wall. The commander turned toward Rin again, his voice darkening. "You were loyal once. I could forgive this, but not if you keep protecting him." "I'm not protecting him," Rin said, her voice firm. "I'm protecting what he carries, and you don't deserve it." The commander's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "You don't even know what it is," he replied. "I know enough," she said. Stepping between him and Evan, the hum from the case seemed louder now, almost like it was responding to the tension. The commander raised his weapon, a heavy blaster with a long, serrated bayonet attached, the glow from its power cell lit. His armor in a sickly red hue, Rin shifted her stance. Spear angled low, ready to strike upward for a long moment. The chamber was silent, except for the hum of the pulse core and the faint drip of water. Then the commander moved, faster than his size should have allowed. Rin met him head-on, their weapons clashing with a sound like thunder in the confined space. Evan stayed near the wall, scanning for another way out. But every tunnel seemed to lead back toward the fight. The soldiers were recovering from the shock, picking up their weapons again. If they got to Rin while she was locked with the commander, it would be over. Evan's eyes landed on an exposed control panel near the corner, wires sparking faintly. He sprinted to it, pulled a multi-tool from his belt, and yanked open the casing. Inside, he found what he was hoping for, the local power junction for the chamber. Without hesitation, he overloaded the circuit. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. The chamber was plunged into near-total darkness. Only the faint blue of Rin's spear and the red glow of the commander's weapon lit the fight. The soldiers shouted in confusion, their shots going wide. Evan used the cover to move behind them, grabbing one by the collar and slamming him into the wall. Rin pressed her advantage, each strike of her spear pushing the commander back. Step by step, finally, with a sharp upward swing, she knocked the blaster from his hands. It clattered to the floor and slid into the darkness. The commander stepped back, breathing heavier now. "This isn't over," he said, his voice steady but edged with frustration. Rin didn't reply. She just grabbed Evan's arm, pulling him toward the maintenance shaft. They slipped into the darkness, the sound of the soldiers shouting behind them fading as they moved deeper into the tunnels. Evan glanced at her as they ran. "You could have taken his offer," he said between breaths. She didn't look at him. I don't betray people, I fight beside," she replied simply. The hum from the case between his legs was steady again, but in the back of his mind, he knew the commander would be coming. For them, and next time, he wouldn't be alone. The tunnels narrowed as they ran, the air turning colder and carrying the faint smell of salt water. Evan's breath came in short bursts, the weight of the case pulling at his shoulder. Rin moved ahead, her spear angled behind her. Ready for anything chasing them, the faint echo of shouting soldiers still followed. But it was distant now. The commander's voice was gone, replaced by the steady thud of their own boots on metal. They turned a corner and found themselves in a sloped passage leading upward. Faint light filtered in from above, the first sign of the surface in hours. Evan slowed for just a second, glancing back. The shadows behind them seemed to shift, but nothing emerged. Rin noticed and spoke without turning. "If you keep looking back, you'll miss what's ahead." He gave a short breath of a laugh. "I'm just making sure we're not running into something worse." The slope ended at a rusted hatch, its wheel locked with years of corrosion. Rin stepped forward and gripped the wheel, her arms tensing as she twisted it. Metal groaned, flakes of rust falling to the floor. With one last push, the hatch gave way. A rush of cool air flooding in. They stepped out into an abandoned industrial yard, lit by the pale glow of two alien moons. The night air was crisp, carrying the distant sound of waves crashing against a shore. Evan scanned the area. Rows of broken machinery, toppled storage crates, and a network of catwalks overhead. Somewhere far across the yard, a faint light blinked, the signal beacon he'd been aiming for since the start. "That's our way out," he said, pointing. Rin followed his gaze, but didn't move right away. "Your commander won't stop," Evan continued. "He'll throw everything at us until he gets the core." Her jaw tightened. "Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance." They crossed the yard quickly, weaving between piles of scrap and twisted pipes. Every sound seemed louder in the open. The crunch of gravel, the clink of Rin's spear against her armor, the soft hum of the core halfway across. A sharp metallic click made them both freeze. From behind one of the storage crates, a small scout drone floated up, its red sensor lights sweeping across them. Evan reacted instantly, grabbing a broken length of pipe from the ground and hurling it at the drone. The impact knocked it sideways, but not before it let out a piercing alarm tone. Within seconds, more drones appeared, their rotors slicing through the night air. Rin's spear became a blur of blue light, each strike cutting a drone in half. Evan drew his blaster and fired in quick bursts, dropping one after another, but for every drone they destroyed, more swarmed in. "They're buying time for the soldiers to catch up," Rin shouted over the noise. "Then we end this fast," Evan replied. Grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the beacon, they ran full speed, the case bouncing with each step. One drone swooped low, nearly clipping Evan's head. Rin's spear flashed upward, slicing it cleanly before it could fire. The beacon was only a few meters away now, a tall, slim tower with a blinking blue light. Evan dropped to one knee, pulling a transmitter from his belt and connecting it to the beacon's port. The device beeped, then began sending a coded signal into the sky. "Extraction in 8 minutes, Evan said, glancing at her. Rin nodded but kept her eyes on the shadows moving at the edge of the yard. Figures were emerging soldiers, their armor catching the moonlight. And at the front of them, the commander, his red-marked armor unmistakable, his voice carried. "Across the yard, Rin, step aside. This is your last chance." She didn't move. Instead, she shifted into a defensive stance, her spear angled low. Evan stood beside her, blaster ready. "You know," Evan said quietly, "for someone who started this day demanding answers, you're doing a lot of trusting." She gave him a quick, fierce glance. "You fight like someone worth trusting." The soldiers advanced, their weapons raised. The commander lifted his own, aiming directly at Evan before he could fire. A deep rumble filled the air from above. Bright searchlights cut through the darkness. A human dropship. Sleek and black, descending fast. Its engines roared as it hovered above the yard. Ropes dropped from its sides, and armed human soldiers began rappelling down. The commander's advance faltered for the first time. He looked between Rin, Evan, and the incoming humans, his jaw tightening. "This isn't over," he said. His voice carrying the weight of a promise. He signaled his troops, and they melted back into the shadows. Evan kept his blaster trained on them until they were gone. Only then did he turn to Rin. The human soldiers reached them, one of them grabbing Evan's arm to help him toward the dropship. But Evan stopped and looked at Rin. "You're coming with us," he said simply. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Humans don't take in aliens like me. Humans take in people who've earned it," he replied, for a moment. She was still. Then she stepped forward. Taking his offered hand, they climbed into the dropship together. The pulse core secure in the case between Evan's legs. As the ship lifted off, the city below shrinking into the distance. Rin sat beside him, her spear resting across her knees. "You never did answer my first question," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. Evan chuckled. "And I probably never will." The dropship angled upward, the stars spreading wide above them. The hum of the core was steady, almost like it approved. And somewhere far below, the commander was already planning his next move.